Welcome to this week's show. In this one, I have a conversation with Mike Ward, the co-owner of the Pioneer Bar. The Pioneer Bar, better known as Pio, is a classic Alaskan bar located in downtown Anchorage. It's been around since the 1950s, before Alaska became a state. Back then, it was a working-class bar with a regular crowd of blue-collar workers and barflies. It eventually began to attract a younger crowd in the late 1990s. That trend has continued to this day, where crusty sourdoughs and weekend warriors drink side by side. This podcast is made possible through the generous support of the Crude Magazine Patreon subscribers. If you already subscribe to the Crude Magazine Patreon, thank you. For those listeners who aren't, please consider subscribing at www.patreon.com/crudemagazine. That's patreon.com/crudemagazine. And pick the subscription tier that works for you. I want to thank everyone subscribed at the Company Man tier. These are the people who have subscribed to the Crude Patreon for $50 or more. Trina Duber, Seward Brewing Company, The Grind Coffee Shop in Juneau, Derek Adolph, Blue and Gold Board Shop, Sharon Liska, Alaska Surf Adventure, Aquila Space, and the newest company man, Northern Knives. Thank you to all the Patreon subscribers. Your money and your support make these conversations possible. And if you have a chance to rate or review Crude Conversations on Apple Podcasts, please do. Okay, back to Mike Ward. Mike's relationship with the Pio goes all the way back to his childhood, when his dad was a regular and he would bring Mike with him. That was around 1980. Mike and his business partner, Dave Croffut, bought the bar in 2013, and they quickly learned that the idea of owning a bar is much different than the reality of it. In reality, you have to deal with controlling crowds, local politics, and all the repairs that come with owning a 100-year-old building. So here he is, Mike Ward. This red light right here, it means we're recording.
Okay, fired up.
Crude Conversations. Listen more than you talk.
Go to work!
So does everyone call you Pio Mike, or is it just some people?
Just some people. It was kind of a nickname. It started as Pio Mikey, and I tried to clip the Mikey because I've just never liked being called Mikey, and it's just kind of gone on from there. It's seems to be more of the bar friends than my friends outside of the bar. But people I meet through the bar, especially girls, always, oh, it's Pio Mike. I'm like, yeah, it's me.
So do you have any other nicknames?
No, not really. I mean, in high school, my nickname was Warthog, just because my last name's Ward, and I don't know, just high school nicknames come about. But that's really about it.
Why Warthog? Were you kind of a bigger guy?
Yeah, no, I still am.
Okay. Let me see. I think when I think of the Pioneer Bar, I think of it as a classic Alaskan bar. It's a relatively small dive bar where oftentimes like crusty barflies mix with the weekend partiers. Do you think that's accurate, or would you describe it differently?
No, that's pretty accurate. It's definitely changed over the years. When I first started working there in 2001, it was a big time Irish bar during the day. All the slope workers and guys that weren't working at the time, that's where they all hung out and drank, and because that's what they all did in Ireland. So when they came over here, that's just what they knew. But now it's kind of progressed into just being a party spot on the weekends, and the bar flies, and it's got the dive bar feel to it, shuffleboard, couple pool tables, dartboards, just a good all around fun spot to hang out.
I had this question kind of further down, but it seems like it goes pretty well here. So I asked on Instagram if anybody would have a question for you, and Peter Wallach asks, how have the demographics of customers changed over the years?
I think it's gotten, well, I'd like to say it's gotten younger would be the biggest thing, like the age demographics. But, it was funny when I first started working at the bar, there were some guys in their early to mid 30s working there. And after I'd been there for a few years, I was 24 and they were, 35, 36. And they were like, man, this bar is just getting really, really young. It's just too young now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is just the same it's always been. And then when I turned 35 and was working there, I was like, man, this bar has just gotten really young. And then I thought to myself, nope, I'm just getting old. The bars really stayed the same.
One thing that I've realized as I've gotten older is I can't be around 21-year-olds when they're partying. Mm-hmm. It's just, their energy level is, it exceeds my energy level for, drinking and partying.
I held on to that for a long time of being able to keep up with them and have that energy. But man, it was about 36, 37, about 2 years after we bought the bar, and I just hit a wall. And it's like, if I'm out past midnight, like, it's not good.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely catches up with you at a certain age. So you and Dave Croffut bought the bar back in 2013, right?
Yep.
But you were familiar with the Pio long before that, right?
Yeah, I grew up in that bar, to tell you the truth. As I said earlier, a lot of the old Irish guys, that was their hangout. One of their hangouts. There were several around town. There was the Chaco, the Irish Setter, Ole's, and the Pioneer were their big hangouts. And my dad immigrated here from Ireland, and so he was a slope worker. So when he was, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or whatever it was, when he was in town, he hung out with his buddies at the bar. So I learned how to play pool there, learned how to throw darts there, knew all the bartenders. I just kind of grew up in there.
In Ireland, there's this, I don't know, maybe for better or for worse, there's a stereotype about, bar culture and drinking, and, the Irish are heavy drinkers. But maybe also a good way to understand it is that the bar scene in Ireland, and I've been to Ireland, so I've actually seen this firsthand. It's like, it's a culture, people go into the bar and they socialize with each other, and, they talk to each other about their day, and they talk to the bartender. Have you tried to instill any of that at the Pioneer since you guys owned it?
To an extent, like our families all hang out there. We spend a lot of time there. We do on Thanksgiving and Christmas, Dave and I, do like a big feast for, anybody who doesn't have a place to go or is traveling or whatever. And it's actually turned into our families go there for Thanksgiving always. And then Christmas, we kind of take turns and are in and out. But, our family spend a lot of time there. I think our parents, both of our moms were kind of against it at first, but then they saw how much fun everybody was having and how happy everyone was, and they didn't have to clean.
Yeah.
at the end of Thanksgiving, and they both came around on it and actually really started to enjoy it.
What were they saying? Were they just like, I'm not going to spend, a holiday at a bar, or what?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, from my mom, at least, my dad was an alcoholic. And so when I started working at the bar, she was not very happy about it. And then as I started bartending and then started managing and then ended up buying it, she still wasn't particularly pleased. I mean, she was proud of me, but it definitely wasn't the life choices that she had wanted me to make.
So what was that like growing up with a father who was an alcoholic?
It was difficult at times. It had good times and bad times, but it was all I knew or all I've ever known. So it just seemed normal to me.
Mm-hmm.
All of my friends that had parents, that weren't alcoholics, they had their issues as well. So, every time you think someone has it better because of something, it turns out that maybe there's something else going on that is just as bad, if not worse. So it was just normal life to me. It was tough at times, but like I said, there was some good times as well.
Were you aware of that concept when you were younger, that, the grass is always greener until you're over there and then you realize like, oh, they have their own stuff going on as well?
Yeah, I think so. I probably more in my teens I realized it, when I was having difficulty with whatever was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would see friends having, wouldn't have the same difficulties as me, but they were having just as hard of a time dealing with something in their personal life or family life.
Mm-hmm. You know what? And I'm asking these questions kind of following along this line. I don't have any of these written down about alcoholism, but a lot of my family suffered from alcoholism as well. And so I always think it's interesting to talk to I don't know, like another person who has lived that life. Like I can totally empathize when you're talking about, the grass is always greener, and then you see what, the other side is like, and you're like, okay, yeah, they got their own issues. And maybe you're not even super aware of, I don't know, that demon in your own family until you get older and you're like, oh, okay, like you start seeing the signs,
I mean, I definitely saw the signs at an early age
Okay.
for the demons in my family, and it's something that is always like I was always conscious of it and aware of it as I was growing up, and in high school, starting to drink and party and do stuff. It was something that was always in the back of my mind, always whenever we were out drinking or hanging out or got the friends together and booze came out.
Did you ever at any point say to yourself, like, I need to slow this down?
Yes and no. There was just times I don't think alcohol ever controlled my life, but there was definitely times when I was drinking too much. Because I worked in the bar, there was a point right when I started bartending where I was working the door 3 nights a week and then bartending 2 nights a week. And I was younger, I was 23, 24. So, and single. So on my nights off, I was down at the bar. So there was times where I was definitely drinking too much, but I definitely reined myself in and, thought to myself, hey, this probably isn't the best way for you to spend all of your time.
For sure. I think that I came to a similar conclusion probably in college, where I'm like, okay, if I keep drinking this way, then I'm not going to be able to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
I read a quote recently that I thought was great. It was something along the lines of, drinking or being an alcoholic means that you are sacrificing tomorrow's happiness for today. So you're using up all of tomorrow's happiness in this moment because, you're going to have to suffer the hangover.
Yeah, there's definitely times where I can agree with that, but there's also, anything can be okay in moderation.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So there's a big difference between going out after work or, going out Friday and Saturday night and having a few drinks with your buddies and hanging out, and going out every Friday and Saturday night and just getting absolutely hammered. And, the only way you can deal with it the next day is to either sleep or to start drinking again.
For sure. Hair of the dog.
Yeah. And I've done weekends both ways. I just think as you get older and you realize what's important and what you want to do with your life or whatever you want to do, you make the decisions.
And I think it might not be popular to say, but it's really fun going over war stories. Like your drinking times and, all the good times you've had with your friends, and maybe you got too shitty one time, but it made a good story.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the good times for me definitely outweighed the bad times as far as my drinking went. There's times where I've, should have pulled the plug and didn't, and it's ended up costing me in some way, but like I said, the goods definitely outweighed the bad.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of alcoholic was your dad?
He was just depressed. He just lived a really, really hard life. His parents both died in Ireland when he was 15, and he was pretty much on his own since then. He had some brothers and sisters, but they were for the most part, they didn't really help each other out. At that time, I think later in life, they, became closer and started helping each other out. But when their parents died when he was 15, he was pretty much on his own. So I think the highest level of education he ever had was maybe 8th grade.
Okay.
8th or 9th grade. but he was one of the most intelligent people that I've ever known. I mean, he could hold a conversation with anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that certain wisdom with kind of those old drunks, or I mean, even like younger people who become old drunks, you know, that it's just you have this I don't know, certain sixth sense. It's like this indefinable. You've suffered so much, so then you can identify the suffering, you know, and you kind of are maybe one with the suffering, if that means anything.
I could see that. I mean, also just living the life he lived, he just experienced a lot, you know, and worked his, you know, he originally went to Canada and worked his way across Canada working for oil companies and ended up in Alaska when the North Slope was starting to boom off. So he just gained a lot of experience and knowledge, just talk with everybody. I mean, he could sit down and talk with anybody and gain insight from their experiences or their knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And so he was a regular at the Pioneer Bar. Do you remember what the Pio looked like back then?
Almost exactly the same.
Okay.
To tell you the truth. I think the floor's changed a couple times and it needs to change again. It's about time for us to redo the whole floor. It was in our plans until we got shut down earlier this year. So it's kind of been put on the back burners, but, you know, I think there's different stools now. Well, there's definitely different stools now. Cause I remember in 03 or 04, when the previous owners bought the new stools, we had a party one night, and it was, if you were sitting at the stool at the end of the night, you could take it home with you just to get rid of them.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah, that was a real thing. It was pretty funny. There was a couple of guys showed up with pickup trucks, and, you know, they brought friends, just like, hey, we're going to have 4 stools from the Pioneer at my house for when we go over there. And I had a couple at my house, and yeah, it was a pretty fun time.
And so what, you just show up to the Pio and you'd screw in the chair and sit down, or what?
No, it was just, you could just at the end of the night, whatever chair, whatever bar stool you were sitting on, you could take home with you.
Oh, okay. And these are just like normal bar stools. They aren't like bolted into the floor.
No, none of our stools are bolted into the floor.
Okay. You know, it's been a while since I've been to the Pioneer, and I mean, the Pioneer has such a reputation, right? Like, in my mind, if me and my friends were going to the Pio, it was like to get really hammered, you know? And I don't know, have you noticed that that's a common theme with people, or do people go there and, you know, just drink moderately and hang out as well?
I think it's a little bit of everything, you know. There's people that go there and just have a couple beers and hang out with their friends and could be there for, you know, 3 or 4 hours or longer. Mm-hmm. And there's guys that go there and have a little bit more and are chasing girls or dancing or whatever. And then there's guys that go there and probably drink more than they should. I definitely wouldn't say that people just go there to get hammered. I mean, we are known for having a strong cocktail. That's always been one of our things.
And Pile Punch.
Yep, the Pile Punch. That was a good creation.
Who did that?
That was me and Saul DeMoss, who is one of the guys that taught me how to bartend and basically taught me everything I know about bartending and being in the bar industry. He now owns the Seward Ale House in Seward with his wife, Liz.
Cool. Okay. And so, I don't know. I feel like I have another question about the Pio Punch, but maybe the question is, for people who aren't familiar with the Pioneer Bar in Anchorage, what is Pio Punch?
Pio Punch is it's just our take on a fruit punch cocktail. We got a bottle of a brand new vodka out from one of the distributors, and they were like, hey, see if you guys can come up with something for this. And Saul and I sat there one night and just experimented, and that's what came of it. Mm-hmm. I had a huge hangover the next day, but the Pile Punch came of it, and it's probably our number one cocktail since we created it. Originally started as a shot, actually, and then we turned it into a cocktail.
And there's also a cocktail called a garbage can, right?
Trash can.
Trash can, that's right. Yeah. And what's that all about?
So that came from Red Bull. The Red Bull rep, CJ von Imhoff, back in the day, he had a bunch of his Red Bull counterparts come up here to do some sort of party, and someone in San Diego, I believe, came up with the trash can, and it's basically a Long Island, but instead of triple sec, you use blue curacao, and then instead of Coke, you put an upside down Red Bull in it, and then you're supposed to crinkle the Red Bull can so it looks like a beat up trash can. Was the original concept behind it. But that took off, man. We were probably one of the first places in Anchorage to serve a trash can, and it became one of our, I don't know if I would say signature drink, but definitely staple drinks. There's other places that made them, but we definitely made a lot.
It gets you there faster.
Yeah.
For sure. To that hammered stage.
And I mean, if you like Red Bull, it tastes way better than Long Island.
You know, I kind of want to get back to when we were talking about the building and, you know, the building being old. And if you know any history of the building or even like history of that bar before you owned it.
So, like I said, in the 50s, it became the Pioneer Bar, or it might have been the Pioneer Club. I'm not exactly sure. It's been both names. But we had a territorial, well, they had a territorial liquor license before Alaska was a state. And then at some point in the 60s, it was sold to a lady named Opal Myers and her husband. I believe her husband bought it, and then he passed away, and she took the reins over in the mid 60s, and she ran it until 93 when she sold it to Denny and Willie.
Mm-hmm.
And then they bought it in 93, and it was pretty much just a regular working class bar. There wasn't any major nightlife in there at all. And they had a daughter named Quincy who started working as a cocktail waitress when she turned 21, and her friends all started coming in. I don't remember which high school she went to. I think it might have been East, but all of her friends started coming in, and then their friends started coming in, and it just grew exponentially from there. I would say probably around like 97 was when that started, 96 or 97.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a year earlier. I'm not exactly sure on the time frame because I wasn't old enough to be in there yet. And then by the time that I started, well, I turned 21 in October 2000, and one of my best friend's older sisters took him and I and a few other people out for the night, and one of our first stops was the Pioneer. And then I guess I never left.
You got stuck.
I got stuck, yeah.
Do you have any wild, I don't know, downtown Anchorage stories from your youth, or even like Pio stories?
Man, it's hard to think of of any one. It's been a lot of fun over the years. You know, I first started going in there just as a customer when I turned 21.
Mm-hmm.
Dave and I, my partner now, we were both working at FedEx and going to school at UAA. And on Friday and Saturday night, after I turned 21, we started going out, and that was one of our stops. We'd, hit up old school, Rum Runners, Humpies, F Street, and the Pioneer. And those guys that worked there recognized my name on my credit card. I had a Philadelphia Flyers credit card, so they remembered the card, and then they recognized the name from my dad because they knew my dad pretty well from being a customer. And then one night, they just asked me to work the door. They had someone they had to fire, and I started working the door, and about 3 months later, I got Dave a job working the door, and then we've both been there ever since.
You guys infiltrated it.
We infiltrated it and slowly took over. But there's definitely been some wild times. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s, some of the stuff going on next door at the Gaslight. That parking lot behind us was a war zone. We'd close up shop and we'd lock all the doors of the bar, and we'd just go out and watch the mayhem ensue out there.
What kind of mayhem?
Just madness, it seemed, in the early 2000s.
Like fights or?
Yeah, fights, all kinds of stuff back there.
Do you know what like incited it, or was it just kind of the element that area brought at that time?
I think it was just the element that the area brought at the time.
You know what's been interesting? As an adult, I have been more conscious of like what is going on downtown Anchorage, like the element of like safety versus the element of, I guess, not safety.
Hmm.
Have you noticed, things changing over the years, or kind of an ebb and flow of like things being safe or sketchy at certain times?
You know, I personally have never not felt safe downtown,
Okay.
but maybe that's just because I've spent so much time downtown.
Hmm.
I've always been there. I'm a bigger guy, so even though I suck at fighting, maybe people think that I'm menacing. I don't know, but I've always been comfortable walking around downtown late at night without any problems. I've definitely, being there, I've seen stuff happen all up and down Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Avenue that probably shouldn't have and that wasn't safe. But I don't think there's been any great significant change. There's definitely been, just like you said, an ebb and flow where it's, it comes and it goes,
Hmm.
and it all just depends on who's downtown. I remember when Platinum Jacks was going strong, Humpies was going strong, Rum Runners was going strong, and the Anchor was across the street from us, was probably the busiest downtown ever was in the mid 2000s. And there was this vortex where people just came downtown and never left. Downtown used to always be, at least when I turned 21, you would go down there and have a couple drinks and have dinner and, walk around a little bit, but then you'd go to Coots and you'd hang out at Coots, and that was the big party spot.
Hmm.
And then if nothing came of hanging out at Coots, you'd end up back downtown for the last call, end of the night, just to see what's going on. And when all those bars opened up downtown and had strong presence downtown, everything shifted from midtown to downtown, and it was just nuts. I mean, it was just people of all walks of life walking around downtown. And for the first 2 years of it, there wasn't really any danger or violence. It's almost like the people that were causing trouble at the parking lot at Coots hadn't realized where everyone had gone yet. And so everyone that was downtown was just there to have fun. No one was there to rob people or steal or cause trouble. Everyone just wanted to have a great time. I mean, I'm sure anytime you involve testosterone and alcohol, there's going to be, mistakes made and dumb stuff done, but everything was pretty peaceful. But then once the criminal element realized where everybody was, that all changed. And that's when you had all the Barmageddon and stuff coming out in the newspapers and the assembly threatening to shut down bars and do stuff. But it wasn't really the bars. It was just that the bars had attracted so many people downtown that's where all the criminals came to attack people. I mean, they had set up video cameras, and you could see this one guy in 10 different videos. It was the same guy that, beat up and robbed 10 people, but the cops just videoed him instead of arresting him.
Yeah, that's weird. I guess maybe I'm not familiar with that incident, but I am familiar with like the inexplicable situation where you had everybody leave, and I forget which bar it was downtown, but I think it was on 3rd. And so the bar would close down, and then everybody from the bar would go outside, and then they all got in this like Royal Rumble. And it happened like 3 or 4 times.
I think that was actually down further on 4th.
Okay.
And it wasn't even that long ago. It was when what was the bar across from the Avenue? The
Gaslight?
No, not the Gaslight. They're right next door to us.
Okay.
Playhouse. It was in the
okay.
Playhouse. It was after the Anchor had shut down and Rum Runners had shut down. A lot of that crowd shifted to the Playhouse, and the Playhouse and Avenue crowds. I remember there being some stuff on the internet of, not riots, but definitely the streets getting blocked and people just doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was like a weird natural phenomenon. It was like something that needed to be coordinated, almost like a flash dance or something,
Yeah.
Like everybody left the bar and they're in the middle of the street and then they start fighting. It reminded me of something from like Anchorman, where they all meet up and they got their Triton and everybody's fighting,
I was never down there for any of that. I only really saw it on the internet. We've always tried to even though my guys, technically for like insurance reasons, they can't really do anything out on the street. But my guys have always been so like proud of the bar and the reputation and what goes on in front of us that anytime anything ever pops off, we always try and stop it from escalating into something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that we've always been good at it, but successful. I wouldn't say good, but we haven't always been successful. But I think my guys and me back when I was working there have done a great job of keeping everything in front of us at least pretty sane.
How often do people get banned from the PIO?
Oh, it happens not with any great regularity. I always try to look at the good in people. So if someone makes a mistake and they do something dumb, with the exception of assaulting a staff member,
Mm-hmm.
but if someone messes up and they start a fight or just do something idiotic, we always try and give them a 1 or 2 month break and kind of give them a heads up that, hey, this is your one chance to not do this again.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to 86 you. I've had not friends, but acquaintances, people that I knew and liked through the bar that have done stupid stuff in the bar. And I've had to be like, hey, you've got to take a break and then come talk to us after, 60 days or 30 days or whatever it is, basically giving them a timeout and then, come back and talk to them and be like, hey, this isn't acceptable. You can't act like this in here. We want you to respect the bar as much as we respect you. And then sometimes that works. Sometimes they've gone on to become great customers and great friends. And other times they've, become habitual offenders that we just have to get rid of.
That all seems pretty civil as far as, telling them that type of behavior is unwanted. And then, they give like this period of kind of being suspended from the bar. And then they come back, and is it during normal hours that they have these conversations of, I know what I did wrong and I'm sorry and I'll never do it again?
Yeah, generally we try to arrange something with them to meet up at a, not a busy time. For the most part now, I let my bartenders handle all of that because I don't know the customers that are out at Friday and Saturday night. I don't know them as well as I did when I was behind the bar, 4 or 5 nights a week.
Mm-hmm.
So up until about 3 years ago, I was doing it, but now I let my guys take care of it. But that's just what we try and do. We don't, like I said, I always try to look at the good in people. Just because you did something dumb doesn't mean you're a bad person and we don't want you back. But you have to realize that, that type of behavior isn't acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it happen with some of my own staff members, where even when I was, bartending there, working the door, where the bartenders ahead of me told somebody like, hey, you work here, we expect better from you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you shouldn't fight in bars to begin with, and you especially shouldn't fight in a bar that you work at. So not only is you being allowed to come in here and drink on the line, but your job's on the line. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that.
What's interesting about that is that I wonder if the fact that Anchorage is a smaller city than, say, like LA or New York, and if, say, you get 86 from a bar in New York, I bet you, or it wouldn't surprise me if the owners of that bar didn't do something similar to what you guys do, because this person's probably never going to come back because there's a million other bars. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
downtown Anchorage, there's like, as far as a bar, there's like a handful.
Yeah. Yeah. We always, you hate to lose a customer, but you have to weigh the pros and cons of them being a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter how much money you spend in the bar. If you're acting in a way that causes us liability and just causes trouble in the bar, that, that affects us in too much of a negative light, that we'd rather lose your business than have something bad happen in the bar.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a difference in the idea of owning a bar versus the reality of owning a bar?
100%, 200%.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty funny. people think that, oh, you own the Pioneer. Oh, you must make so much money. It's like, no, not really. We bought the business, so we're paying it off.
Mm-hmm.
We're just like everyone else. We're just running a business. It just happens to be a bar. and, and people don't realize all the behind the scenes stuff, especially when you own a 100-year-old building. Like I can't even count. I can't even count, like not including hands, toes, anything. Like I don't even know how many times Dave and I have had to do work on that building that we try to do ourselves to save money. You know, whether it's plumbing stuff or flooring stuff or roofing stuff or electrical stuff or anything we can. We've got buddies that have businesses, electrical companies and plumbing companies. So they come in and kind of show us what we need to do and how to do it and stuff like that. Electrical stuff is a little bit different because you pretty much have to have another company do that, especially with commercial buildings. But everything else, we just try to kind of fix on our own. And like I said, I can't even count how many times we've been under that bar, laying on our backs, working on the plumbing, whether it's the sinks or the ice bins or the water lines or all of that, everything behind there.
Yeah, it sounds like a real fixer-upper.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And we had a janitor he was a great janitor, but he considered himself a really good handyman. And he really wasn't. He
In what way?
he never fixed something properly. He would fix it so that it was just good enough to last a little while. So, and he wouldn't tell us about it. And this went on even before we bought the bar. So he wouldn't tell the previous owners that he had done something. So, they thought everything was fine. And then something that he had jury rigged 10 times gave out in such a way that it wasn't an easy fix anymore. It was an expensive major fix.
Mm-hmm.
Plumbing stuff mainly is the biggest part, just because water, what you live on water, but man, it'll kill buildings.
Has anything surprised you guys having owned it now for 7 years?
Yeah, it'll be 7 years in October. I guess my biggest surprise, I can't necessarily speak for Dave. I'm pretty confident I can, but dealing with the city and the police and the assembly and the municipality and all that stuff was the biggest wake up call for us. We had managed the bar since 2007, so we had a pretty good idea of how to run it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it came to all the licensing and dealing with AMCO and like I said, the police, the municipality, and that was the biggest wake up call for us. Like, oh, this is not as easy as it seems. You've got to keep everybody happy. And, people that aren't in the bar industry don't understand what really goes on in a bar. So they just sit there and they kind of look down upon it. Like, oh, this isn't necessary. People don't need to be going to bars anyways. So,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the harder we make it on the bars, the less people will go out and drink and cause trouble.
Do you have any specific examples?
I'm hesitant to say anything because the last time I called out somebody, it ended up biting us in the ass. But there's been good and bad police officers that have been downtown. There's been incidents where the police have come in and not known what really happened or has gone on and completely overreacted to the situation and caused trouble for us. But at the same time, there's been cops downtown that have done a great job and, understand that you're running a business and, bad stuff that happens in a bar is bad for business. That's never good for business. It's the last thing we want to happen.
Do you think that the city of Anchorage ever pushes back on new and progressive ideas?
100%. They constantly push back on new and progressive ideas. The state of Alaska in general has. The organizations like CHAR and the Alaska Hospitality Retailer Association have been trying to work with the state legislature to rewrite some of the liquor laws in Alaska that are so outdated but they're just constantly getting pushed back. I'm sure you remember, I think it was last summer or the summer before when the huge brewery, like the brewery versus bars
Mm-hmm.
stuff kind of came into the public. And, it was the liquor industry in general was trying to progress stuff, trying to to open up business and be pro business, but the legislature just fought back and kind of slowed everything down and brought it to a halt. I think they finally have some Title IV rewrite stuff in the works that is going to be good for business and change some laws, but it's been a constant fight.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the city of Anchorage is so scared of change?
I don't know if they're so scared of change as they're just, for lack of a better term, they're just kind of anti-alcohol.
Okay.
You know, it seems like politicians now seem to, especially our assembly right now, seem to be very anti-industry unless, you know, they need you for a fundraiser. You know, they definitely want to have beer and wine and alcohol at their fundraisers, but when you're trying to run a business with beer, wine, and alcohol, they seem to try and put up as many roadblocks as they can.
You know, I think of Brown Bag Sandwich Company when I think of Anchorage kind of pushing back on these new and progressive ideas. And for listeners not familiar with Brown Bag, it was a sandwich shop in downtown Anchorage that was eventually also a bar. And it was owned by a young couple who a lot of people believe were more or less kind of bullied out of business.
Brown Bag was an interesting situation. I knew the people that owned it very well just through growing up in Anchorage and being in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And when they undertook turning Brown Bag into a bar as well, when they moved locations and went from just having beer and wine to having a full liquor license, it just seemed like it got out of hand for them. I think they did a lot of things wrong in operating it. But they definitely caught a lot of backlash from the neighbors who made life very hard for them. You know, the woodshed had been a bar for years.
Yeah.
And years and years and years and years and years. And when it shut down, that apartment building next to it, I think it was 2 years, maybe even 3 years that there wasn't a bar in that location.
Mm-hmm.
And so they got used to there not being a bar there. And so when a bar opened up in there, and then, for lack of a better term, you know, the downstairs of Brown Bag was a club. And so there was loud music and people partying and having a great time. And so when they left, it was loud. When they were there, it was loud. You know, when they came outside, it was loud.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was people who were just unhappy that there was a bunch of commotion going on outside of their residence, which I can understand. But at the same time, you're living downtown in the middle of a commercial area. So,
and there was a bar there prior too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's always a little interesting to me that there was a bar there for so long. And then, like you said, and I get it, like 3 years, no bar, you know, that must be blissful, right? Compared to what it was prior to that. But your status quo at that point, living in those apartments, is living next to a bar.
Yeah. Which it had been for, you know, the 30 years prior to that, if not longer.
Exactly.
And there definitely some stuff got out of hand at Brown Bag. Like, that's without a doubt. Some of the fights and stuff that happened outside was just mind blowing. But, you know, a lot of that comes down to how you run your bar at the same time. You control your bar through music. Like, a lot of times, I don't necessarily have the crowd to justify having a DJ, but when I have a DJ, I can control the music that's being played. And the music that's being played in your bar has a lot to do with how everyone acts and, you know, the time they have in your bar, both for good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so specifically, like, you can't play a ton of gangster rap in a bar in Anchorage because it attracts the clientele that is bound to cause trouble. And I hate to say it because I love gangster rap. I mean, I grew up in the 90s listening to Wu-Tang, or I went to high school in the 90s listening to Wu-Tang and Dr. Dre and love the music. But when you play it in a bar, it's like it takes over and the crowd takes over, and then it just gets out of control.
Honestly, I only listen to like really angry rap, right? That's just like, that's kind of, I shouldn't say I only listen to that. I listen to a lot of stuff, but if I listen to rap, it's usually like, you know, Jedi mind tricks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like happy music. And what I noticed at a certain point, especially living in Alaska, I can't listen to a lot of that music in the wintertime.
Well, and especially if you've been drinking,
Yeah, exactly.
if you've had a couple cocktails in you and hear something, some heavy duty rap come on.
So instead of rap, what do you guys play? Like some Kenny G?
Yeah, don't knock the sax. No, I think that might be worse for business than rap. Um, it really depends on the time of day. So when the DJs first come on at 10, I ask them to play, keep it pretty light, like some classic rock, a lot of rock early on. And then when the crowds come in and people want to dance, we kind of move to and I hate to say this, but we move to like a top 40 playlist.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly songs even in the top 40 that we can't play. Some of the rap and that's come out, and now just even as popular as it is, just doesn't work in a bar setting. The DJs are always trying to push the limits because they love to play the music that they listen to and enjoy. And it's good for business up until a point. The great DJs in Anchorage, and I've got two of the best that play consistently now. I've got Jesse Cross and Joe Brady.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some good ones throughout the years. Julio, Spencer Schroyer, DJ Livingston. We've had some great DJs. Some of the best DJs in Anchorage play at the Pioneer. Alex the Lion is another great one. And they know how to read the crowd. So, if the crowd is a little flat and not on their feet having fun, they know how to pick the crowd up. And then they push that. And they try not to push it over the limit. You try and push it right to the limit, and then you kind of slow it back down, and give everybody a chance to, for lack of a better word, relax, and
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of build it back up. But it's a constant. There's definitely an ebb and flow to playing music in the bar, to control the crowd, to keep them happy and keep them dancing and keep them buying drinks.
What's interesting about a bar, and I think that this has kind of been a theme in this conversation, but I think it would inevitably be a theme talking about bars in general, is that it is kind of this game of controlling the crowd, right? So there's a lot of like psychology involved, right? So if you're talking about the DJ, they're reading the crowd, and maybe this song is working and then this song isn't working, so let's go back to like a higher tempo upbeat song. And then if you were to talk about bartenders, right, like they're sitting there listening to people's potentially their stories, their woes, their successes, their failures, and they're responding to it. Bars I think are just an interesting place.
They're definitely an interesting place. I mean, I love the bar industry. It's a ton of fun. Like I said, I'm not out so late anymore as I used to be, but I love to just go there and hang out and talk with people. There's a ton of regulars that come in throughout the day that I can just sit there and BS with for an hour, just talking about random life stuff or just the happenings or what's going on in their lives. And even not as a bartender anymore, just as, being another customer in there hanging out. It's great fun. And that was one of the biggest things that I loved about bartending was interacting with people. You have to be a people person to be a bartender, to be a good bartender, at least.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of people get drawn into bartending because you can make really good money bartending. But to truly be a successful bartender and to be a good bartender, you have to enjoy it as well. You can't just be there for the money. If you're in the bar industry just for the money, you're not going to be happy in the long run. But if you enjoy the industry and you enjoy people and talking with people and just being around people and being a social person, then the possibilities are endless. I've created some of my best friends in the world are from the bar. Almost all of my close friends, with the exception of the guys that I went to high school with and stuff like that, are somehow related to the bar industry. I'm getting married in June next year, and I have 6 groomsmen. And with the exception of one of my oldest friends in the world I went to preschool with, the other 5 groomsmen are all I can trace how we met and how we became friends go directly to the Pioneer.
Is the Pioneer, is it going to be a part of your wedding at all? Will you guys go there for drinks before or after?
In some way, yes. The wedding is it's out in a little farm in Peters Creek that has an apple orchard. So we'll probably get ready like downtown. So the groomsmen and the bridesmaids will probably do something around downtown. I'm sure that me and my groomsmen will end up at the Pioneer for something before the wedding. Afterwards, we probably won't end up back there, but the bar is going to do the bar for the wedding at the Native Heritage Center. So there'll be some of my guys there and some other friends that don't work for me that are bartenders that will actually bartend the wedding. So my guys can go to it.
My wife and I also got married at the Native Heritage Center. It's a really beautiful place.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous. It's a great time. We're just having the reception there. The actual ceremony is going to be out at a little farm in Peters Creek. That's really pretty.
You know, I have this line of questioning that I think became more important because you had mentioned the legislature and how they're against alcohol. So, to what extent do you think a bar and its staff are responsible for its patrons?
I think to be a responsible owner, you have to have responsible people behind the bar. And when you have responsible people behind the bar, they can pay attention to what people are doing. We never have ultimate control over somebody. So if someone comes into the bar, they could have chugged a half a bottle of vodka in the parking lot before they came in, and they're going to come into the bar and they're not going to show any signs of impairment yet. But they can come into the bar and have one drink, and a half an hour later they're passed out or they're getting into a fight or causing some sort of trouble. Mm-hmm. So it's a really hard job that the bartenders and doormen have to try and keep an eye on everybody in the establishment. I think my guys do a really good job of it. We try and pay attention to what's going on with everybody. My bartenders are paying attention to how many drinks so-and-so has had. Like, oh, this is their, someone might be on their 6th vodka Red Bull, but they've also been there for 6 hours, Mm-hmm. But if someone's, getting their 4th vodka Red Bull and they've only been there for 40 minutes, might be like, okay, this guy we need to slow him down a little bit. Next time he comes up, offer him a glass of water and tell him to take it easy. You have to walk this fine line because you want people to be in there spending money, but at the same time, you don't want people getting wasted and doing something stupid. Mm-hmm. And once they leave our establishment, it's out of our hands completely. And that's the scariest part because there's a ton of liability with being a bar owner.
And what kind is that?
Just if someone goes out and gets into a car accident or does something stupid, it can come back on us. Mm-hmm. And, it might not be, our fault. It might just be that we were the last place that they had a cocktail, or we were just a place that they had a cocktail, but somebody that had something happen to them blames us for their behavior. It's hard enough to regulate everything that goes on inside of a bar, let alone when people leave the bar.
Yeah, I think that's impossible. That's like...
Yeah, it honestly is impossible. I mean, you try and do your best. Like it's easier for our regulars, the guys that we know that came down there and, so-and-so pulls up, his truck's parked right out front. We know he drove here. When he goes to leave, my guys are going to say, hey, give us your keys. We'll pull your truck around back. We've got a little parking alcove. We pull customers' cars back there all the time during the weeknight so they don't get parking tickets. Because I'd rather lose a parking space out back than have that person get a DUI or even worse, get into an accident and cause themselves or someone else harm. Mm-hmm. And so, my guys are constantly looking out for the regulars to make sure that they're, not making bad decisions. But like you said, it's next to impossible for everybody because you don't know, somebody parked 3 blocks away. They came to the Pioneer and hung out for 2 hours, had a few cocktails, and then go get in their car and get into a wreck. Like, how are we supposed to stop that? Mm-hmm. There's no way for us to know they were going to drive. And there's no way for us to stop them from driving. I mean, as an owner, I care about everybody that comes through there. And when I was bartending, it was the same way. Like if you were in the bar drinking with us, you're part of the family, and we want to help you and encourage you to make good decisions. We want you to have a good time, and some people need to let loose, and some people need to not let loose. And there's a time and place for everything, but we always try to encourage people to be smart about what they're doing, just because the last thing we want is for somebody to make a mistake or do something that will affect them for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. Has owning a bar taught you anything about Alaskans in general, or maybe the people of Anchorage in specific?
Mainly Alaska is just such an amazingly diverse community, and Anchorage is a diverse community. There's so many different people out there, different walks of life, different jobs, different ethnicities, different habits, different personalities. There's there's no two people that are alike. So it's constantly just learning about people and experiencing, the experience of getting to know people and enjoy their personalities and behaviors.
Yeah, I think that that's probably something that I think as people get older, they become more isolated. I think that's just the nature of getting older. Your circle becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And so one of my promises to myself has always been to constantly be learning, right? Like I want to be a lifelong learner. And in order to be a lifelong learner, you really have to continue to put yourself almost like either in uncomfortable situations or situations where you're constantly going to be around people. And like you're saying, you're constantly around other people and you're learning from them because you're not creating your own echo chamber,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're always experiencing something new. I'm a very social person. I love talking with people. It drives my girlfriend crazy, or fiance now, sorry. It drives my fiance crazy because, we can't go out to dinner or go to a bar or go anywhere really without running into somebody that I know, not just because of owning the bar, but because I worked at the bar for so long and because I grew up in Anchorage and it really is a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're always, always running into somebody, and something that should take 5 minutes running in to get something ends up taking me 10 or 15. Or we'll go out to dinner and we'll be walking to the table and I'll run into somebody that that I enjoy talking to, and I don't want to just blow them off because I'm there to have dinner. There's somebody that took the time to say hi to me, so I want to talk to them and see how their day's going or whatever. She really gets driven crazy when I'll be at home and someone will call and, "Oh, Mike, you need to come down and do this. We need to get something out of the safe," or, we need you to fix the computer or the ATM or whatever, and I'll be like, "Okay, baby, I got to run down to the bar real quick." And she'll be like, "How long is this going to take?" I'll be like, "I don't know." She's like, "Well, what do you need to do?" I was like, "Well, I have to do this. So you should be back in about a half an hour." I'm like, "Well, I'd like to tell you that, but the odds are good that I'm going to run into somebody that I want to talk to or that wants to talk to me. So I'm going to sit down and talk to him." So let's shoot for an hour. And I can't really make any promises on that either.
I'm the same way. Obviously, it's different for me because I don't own a bar, so I'm not, my circle is different, I guess. But my attraction to talking to people is very similar to that. One of the people that I love talking to are cab drivers. And my wife, I don't think it annoys her. She's just like, "You always like to talk to cab drivers," just all, comments on it. And I don't know if I'm the same way with Uber or Lyft drivers. I think to a much lesser extent, because cab drivers always interest me, like why this profession? And, they always have really interesting, cool stories.
Yeah.
And usually I always sit in the front seat. Especially if I've had a few drinks,
I'm 100% the same way. I'm just as bad with Uber drivers as I am with cab drivers. And I wouldn't say that it annoys my fiance either, but she definitely
notices it.
Yeah, she definitely comments on it. She'd be like, "Yeah, it was a 20-minute drive home and you talked to that guy the entire time." I was like, "Yeah, did you hear the story he was telling us? He just moved here from Afghanistan and he's trying to carve out a life for himself or whatever it is." And it's just fun. It's just fun learning about people and learning about their experiences.
Do you have any profession in specific that, like me, it's the cab drivers. For some reason, I'm just always drawn to them. Anything like that?
I'd probably have to say that for me, it's probably like cab drivers and Uber drivers as well, just because it's such an interesting profession, and people that are drivers, whether it's a cab driver or an Uber driver, are just from every different walk of life. Like there's, it could be a college student who's just, making extra money, doing it part time, or it's, it's somebody's second job. They could be, a construction worker or a esthetician, or, work somewhere in retail, or a bartender, that just something they're doing on the side, and I think a lot of people that end up in that profession are also pretty sociable. They want to talk to people. You can definitely tell when you get a driver that isn't sociable, like they're just there because they're making extra money. But when you get a driver that enjoys interacting with other people, it makes for a fun drive home, whether you've had a couple drinks or not.
Have you learned anything or had any epiphanies from one of those random conversations?
I wouldn't say any major epiphanies, just, you just learn like how hard somebody else's life can be and like what it took them to get where they are. So it'd be more just like social knowledge and learning about people than any major epiphanies.
What's interesting about that is it kind of gets back to one of the original things that we were talking about, was understanding that the grass is not always greener on the other side. So we've come full circle. I've connected the two. Okay, so I have one more Instagram question, and I think it might be an easy one for you. This one is from Garrett Fessler. I think I'm saying his last name correctly.
Yeah.
Oh, you know him?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. He asked, can you bring back the cigarette machine?
No.
No?
No, we can't bring back the cigarette machine.
Why's that?
Well, we didn't own it in the first place. It was owned by the guy that was running the pool tables at the time. He did our pool tables and jukebox. Interesting fact, a bar is not technically allowed to own their own jukebox.
Really?
Yeah.
Why's that?
I don't know. It's just the way the laws are written. So we have to go through a company that owns the jukebox. And then we also have to pay all the fees and stuff, all the ASCAP, and there's two different organizations that we have to pay fees to just to have a jukebox in the bar.
Wow, that's interesting.
But this, anyways, the cigarette machine we didn't own, and that thing caused more problems than it was worth, to be honest with you. It was just so old because cigarette machines are not something that's really made anymore. We toyed the idea of putting a vending machine where the cigarette machine was and having cigarettes and snacks and stuff in it, but we couldn't really find anything that had a small enough footprint to work there. So we ended up just getting rid of it and putting an ATM there instead.
Is there still conversations circling about having a cigarette machine, or is that idea dead?
It's pretty dead. We discussed having cigarettes behind the bar, but we discussed it with our staff, and we discussed it amongst ourselves with Dave and I, and just kind of came to the conclusion that it wasn't something we wanted to deal with. It would just be another shopping run we had to do and another thing to keep track of. And the amount of people that ask to buy cigarettes has significantly gone downhill in the last 5 years.
Do you think less people are smoking?
I don't want to say less people are smoking, but I think maybe it's just because we haven't had a cigarette machine for so long. They know we don't have it to buy. And the Gaslight sells cigarettes and Darwin sells cigarettes. So there's cigarettes a block away if someone desperately needs them.
Okay, so Garrett Fessler.
sorry, Garrett. Cigarette machine is not coming back.
Go to Darwin's or Gaslight.
Yeah. I don't even think Garrett smokes, so that's the really funny thing. Actually, I'm pretty sure he doesn't.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, that's all for my questions, man. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we really covered a lot. It was fun talking with you.
You can support local grassroots journalism at www.patreon.com/Crude Magazine. Crude Conversations is written, hosted, and produced by me, Cody Liska, for Crude Magazine. Music was produced by Alcoda Beats.